Welcome to the Hopeful Divorce. I'm Hope, your family law friend. After working in family law firms for many years and watching thousands of divorces play out, I've learned some things about what does and doesn't work, and I'm here to share.
This question is from the Divorce Men subreddit. I'm 34-year-old man, dated my wife, now 31, for 3 years. We have now been married a year and a half. At the time, she was coming off of her divorce from her ex-husband. Summarized to say it was time for the two of them to move on. Independent friends verified it was time. I'm also really trying not to make this post political, even though I know that's where this is going to. I'm a conservative. She was a moderate that did lean slightly to the left. However, over the last year and change, that lean has turned into something else entirely. She honestly is not the same person I married, which makes me question more than just political alliances. Makes me question the deeper foundational differences at the root of political basis. It seems like we constantly get more and more arguments, and it seems like anytime she brings up anything political, it's never to share stories from current events or to just keep us both informed. It's always to start an argument or starting a debate. I do love her. I know she loves me. But I can't help but think that we are heading towards divorce at the slowest pace because anytime we have a conversation of children, it never goes the way that I would hope. Anytime we talk about politics, as I mentioned, it always gets into heated, very heated debate or arguments. My question is, should I just jump to what feels like the inevitable and save ourselves a lot of heartache? Or am I just in a terrible season of life and things will get better? This question is definitely so current for our times. So many people are facing this. In the last 10 years or so, politics has become the focus in our lives a lot more so than it used to be, at least, from my perspective. It seems like politics is a big part of the conversation and of our culture in a way that, it's always been there, but it wasn't the focus of so many things until, more recent years. Most people I know have lost friendships and relationships with family members because of politics, because arguments get so heated that they end up ending long-term relationships. So this is a tough situation because when it's your partner, that's different than when it's your sibling or your cousin or a friend from university. Like, it's your partner. And the thing about politics is it's not just politics, okay? Politics are an expression of your view of the world. Whatever your political beliefs are, it shows what you feel is the way that things should be. It shows what you feel is important and what's not important. It shows what you think is good and what you think is bad. That's at the core of who you are. For every one of us, it doesn't matter what your politics are. Your politics speak to who you are. And so when you and your spouse are on opposite sides, it can be really difficult. And so I completely understand why this man is so concerned, because he's saying it's just inevitable. We don't agree on the core of what our beliefs are. So how can this work out? And so it is really important that he is raising the alarm. And my advice to him is that he needs to sit down with his wife and have a serious conversation about this. I wouldn't do it when you're talking about politics. I would wait and maybe plan a little bit of a special event. Like, don't do it at home like you normally do when you might get into a conversation about politics. Go somewhere, go to dinner or go for a walk or go do something where it's a little bit different from your routine. And then tell her that you are afraid that your marriage is going to end because of this. Because I suspect that the wife in this scenario doesn't understand how much this is hurting him and that he's feeling like this is the end of the relationship. Now maybe she is, but I would say most of the time when people are doing this, they're just feeling passionate about the thing that they believe. They're just feeling so passionate about it. And a lot of things happening in the world. A lot of people are really clinging to politics as sort of like the solution to the problems of life. And so sometimes we get too enthusiastic about it. I know I have. There have certainly been times where when I think back on it now, where I had conversations with people about politics and I regret how intense those conversations got. And I lost sight of the relationship that I had with those people. And I think most of us can relate to that. That maybe we let politics get a little too out of hand. And it's because we care, but it's still not okay to alienate people. And so we all have to figure out how we can have our beliefs and get along with each other. And so my recommendation is that he talk to her about, like, I'm considering divorce. That's how serious this is, because she may not be aware of it. And then I would recommend that you probably talk to a couples counselor and see if you can set up some boundaries, because you don't have to agree with your spouse on politics. Lots of people don't. There are many people who have completely different political viewpoints as their spouse, and they can get along and have happy marriages. There are some famous people in history who have been, married, who are on, people who are actually political consultants for different political opposing parties. They both work for their separate parties, and yet they have a happy marriage. That has happened. There are people in history where this has come up. For example, Charles Darwin and his wife was deeply religious, a very devout Christian, and he was the person who came up with the theory of evolution, which was a big affront to Christianity at that time. So people can have very differing views as their spouse and still have happy marriages. It does happen, but you have to have some boundaries and some respect for each other. And it sounds like, for whatever reason, that's not happening in this marriage. So saying, hey, this is what I'm thinking, that this is going to be the end of our marriage. We need to figure something else out. And then either work it out themselves or with a couples counselor to have some rules of what you're going to talk about, when you're going to talk about it, what topics are off limit, what kinds of comments and things don't work and are not fair. And then you have some ground rules, because look, healthy debate is a good thing. Some of the best things I've learned in life are from people who disagree with me politically. When you only talk to people who agree with you, you get just one perspective. And the conversations that I've had with people on the other side of the political spectrum of me have sometimes been some of the most important conversations, because I understood something from a different point of view that I never would have gotten I never would have gotten there on my own. It's not necessarily bad that you disagree with your spouse, but you have to have rules of engagement. And if your spouse isn't willing to change this, and if your spouse isn't willing to work with couples counseling, if your spouse isn't willing to set up some rules of engagement, then yeah, unfortunately, you may have to. You may have to end up getting divorced over this. I would not recommend having children right now. I would get this resolved before you have children, because having children is not going to make this impasse any better. It's going to make it harder. And so if you do have children, they deserve to grow up with parents. Whether you stay married or not, all children deserve to grow up with parents who have respect for each other. They don't have to stay married and they don't have to stay in the same house, but having some limited amount of respect and courtesy for each other is really good for your children. So hold off on having kids and see if you can figure out some rules of engagement. Taking a quick pause in today's episode to remind you, this podcast is built around your questions. If you're navigating divorce, separation, property division, child support, custody, co-parenting, blended families, or anything in between, you don't have to figure it out alone. Chances are, if you're wondering about something, someone else is too. You can submit your questions anytime through my website at hopefuldivorce.com. Whether it's a big, complicated situation or a simple, what does this legal term mean, or why does this happen this way? All questions are welcome. I read every submission, and your question could be featured in an upcoming episode to help not just you, but others going through similar experiences. So if something's been on your mind, send in your question. Let's keep the conversation moving forward. This question is from the Divorce Men subreddit. I'm in the beginning phase of divorce process. Soon-to-be ex and I have agreed to have a plan in place before going to the mediator, so we're not spending much money on their billable hours. We had one talk, and I'd say it didn't go as well as either of us had hoped. We did agree on some things with regard to our children and the finances regarding them. We both did get a little heated based on some other things she wanted, and I didn't fully agree to some things, and this is where I turned to this group for some advice. Part of her list is that she wants half of my retirement/pension, which I do not agree to. She also wants me to up and leave the house all to her, which I do not agree to. She has her lawyer and she's told me she has met with. I can't afford one, and I've told her that. In terms of the house, I replied with, I'll leave you the house, but we'll discuss my buyout portion. She was not thrilled on that. In terms of my retirement pension, I've looked into it after our conversation, and she is not legally entitled to half of it. With the type of retirement plan I have and the state I live in, there is a formula that is used to calculate the proper portion for a divorce. She does work full-time and has her own retirement plan, which, with the same formula, I'd receive my portion of hers. But I don't want it. Neither of us are retiring anytime soon anyway. As much as her and I both said we are not looking to fight over these agreements, how can I peacefully and calmly explain to her I'm fine with her getting part of my retirement, but it will be the proper portion as stated by law? Bottom line, I do still love her. I'm not looking for this to be messy and nasty. I didn't want this. She does. This is a really great question. I'm really glad to hear that you and your soon-to-be ex-wife are looking at mediation and that you're committed to it not being messy and nasty. That's great. And, in general, the two of you talking things through and trying to work out a plan and a general sketch of an agreement before mediation, that's also a pretty good idea if you can do it. Talking things through, because you've already in your question shown why this is great, because there was something you didn't agree on in terms of your retirement and pension. So you went and you did some research and you found out what the laws are in the state where you live, and there's a formula. Now you have some information, so when you go to the mediator and you talk about this, you can say, the law says it's a formula, you don't get half, and I'm happy to give you your share that you're entitled to under the law. That's a great position to be in for mediation. Now, you asked, how do I calmly explain this to her? At this point, I would not try and do that. Okay, I would leave it for the mediation. You've already shown that the two of you are not going to agree on this issue, and that's the whole purpose of the mediator. That's why they're there. You can try to reach agreement on things yourself, and that's great because some things are not that difficult for you to reach agreement on. So go ahead, do that. Get those things agreed to. The things that are hard, once you start to run into a bit of a wall, just stop the conversation, do some research, and then let the mediator help you work through that. The mediator is trained when people can't agree on something. They have special techniques that they will use to slow the conversation down, to help you, give you a chance to express your perspective, have her listen to it, and vice versa. That's exactly what a mediator is there for, because a lot of people can't work it all out themselves. It's just tricky. So having that mediator, that neutral person there, really helps facilitate the agreement. And it's great that you went and got that information. It's good to be prepared for mediation. Do the research that you can, gather the legal information that you can. Just make sure that the information that you're finding is from a source like a government website, or that it is from, it's not just ChatGPT or, what the internet says. You want to make sure that if you're looking at information, say there's a lot of great information from lawyers out there, their blogs on their websites, make sure that it is, if you're citing information, it's from a lawyer who is in your jurisdiction who is sharing this information. And then if you can, usually lawyers, when they post information, they'll tell you the name of the law. They'll tell you where the source of their information. Get that as well. Print it all off. Have it prepared for when you go to your mediation. It's very useful for the mediator, for you to be able to say, this is why I feel that, it should be this way. It helps the mediation process go forward. It makes it a little less emotional, but the mediator will help you navigate that. The other thing I'm going to strongly recommend you do is that you get some legal advice before you go to mediation. I know you said that cost is a concern. You do not have to spend $5,000 to hire a lawyer for the whole process. You can pay for a consultation with a lawyer and just say you are going to mediation and you are just looking for some general advice before mediation, and that you may want to get some general advice from them after, at the end of your mediation when you're looking at a settlement agreement. Otherwise, you just want a consultation before mediation. And a lot of lawyers are happy to do that for you. And you're looking at an hour, maybe an hour and a half of that lawyer's time. Now, before you go to that meeting, the key is that you need to be very prepared for your meeting with your lawyer. That will save you a lot of money. Bring your last 3 years of your tax returns, bring your last few pay stubs, get the information on your pension from your employer. Contact them. You need to see what your current balance is on that. And if you're here in Ontario, the way that pensions are divided is you get a family law value. So if you contact your retirement plan, say, I'm getting divorced and I need a calculation for the family law value. Now, sometimes it does take a little while to get that, so I would at least start the process of getting the family law value done. The plan administrator is going to have you fill out a form that says, the date that you got married and the date that you separated. The separation date here in Ontario is going to be the day that one of you said the marriage is over and you've decided to live separate and apart. It doesn't have to be the day that one of you moved out. It can be the day that one of you said, I want a divorce. That would be generally what's considered. You can also just agree to a date with your soon-to-be ex. You can just say, what are we going to consider the separation date? You can pick it and say, okay, we agree that it's going to be this particular day, January 1st, or, whatever day you want to pick that makes sense for you. That's what you want to choose. And then you'll give that information to your retirement. They will do a calculation and they'll tell you exactly what your ex-wife's share of your pension will be. And then if you agree to doing the family law value, they'll even handle the transfer. They will just take it from your account and they will directly transfer it into her retirement account. And then the same thing will happen with her retirement plan. They will do the same thing. They'll do the calculation and they can just send it to you. And then it's equalized. You can do that. But if you go to mediation with this information, if you go to your lawyer saying, hey, I've already gotten the family law value, and then do the same thing with your house, you need to contact your realtor and find out what the approximate value of it is now. You need to get your mortgage statements and find out, what the amount that you owe on it so that you can calculate what the equity might be in it. And why it's so important to talk to a lawyer is your things like dividing of the matrimonial home, that does vary from place to place. Here in Ontario, the matrimonial home, regardless of if one of you owned it before or not, it's just going to be divided in half. But in other places, it's going to be handled similar to the way that the retirement plan is. They're going to, if one person owned the house before marriage, and let's say that house was worth $100,000 on the date of marriage, now the house is worth $600,000. Okay, then it would take that. There's now been a $500,000 increase in the value of the house. So that $500,000 would be divided in two, and the person who owned the house before marriage, they'd get $100,000 plus $250,000. So they'd get $350,000, and then the other spouse would get $250,000. That's how it is in some places. Here in Ontario, regardless of who owned the house first or when it was purchased, it would just be divided down the middle. And if it was a $600,000 home, then the value would be $300,000 each. So if the wife wanted to stay in the home, she would have to pay out that $300,000 to him. So that's why it's so important that you talk to a lawyer, because depending on where you live, certain property can be divided in different ways. And it's best to get some advice from someone local, and to do as much research as you can about the law before you go to mediation.
Thanks for listening to The Hopeful Divorce. If this episode was helpful to you, share it with someone who might need it, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future conversations. And as you deal with challenges of separation, divorce, and rebuilding your life, always remember the wise words that Christopher Robin told his friend Winnie the Pooh. You're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep moving forward.